Sorry. Hi, everyone, and welcome to OfficeZen's webinar, a CTO's playbook, designing your tech team to maximize productivity in 2024. I'm Nick, an engineering manager at OfficeZen, and I'll be hosting tonight's webinar. We're waiting on a few more people to join, so feel free to grab something to drink, settle in. We'd love to know where you're joining from, so drop your name, location in the chat, and feel free to drop a LinkedIn if you want to connect. Nice, look, we've got some people from Berlin. Welcome. Okay, I think we're ready to start. Welcome again to everyone that's just joined. I'm Nick, and I'll be hosting tonight's event. A few words about OfficeZen. OfficeZen is a developer talent marketplace that was founded in Cape Town, South Africa in 2016. We've since expanded into what we call Middle Earth. Yes, a Lord of the Rings reference, which is GMT plus 2 time zones spanning most of Africa through to Europe. OfficeZen's marketplace helps over 2,000 companies in Africa and Europe hire curated, job-seeking software developers. Companies on OfficeZen can directly reach out to skilled developers with upfront information about preferred tech stack, salary, and previous roles, and make the hires in 25 days on average. We also had a strong focus on community, running events like this for people like you and talent acquisition professionals. If you're hiring or would like to browse the developers currently live on OfficeZen, simply hit the request to trial in the poll on your screen, and we'll send you a link to try out OfficeZen for yourself. We have listened to the community, and we're cutting through the noise to help bring you more Zen. Our webinar series focuses on practical takeaways, tips from industry leaders, and the latest insights on software developer hiring. Tonight's no different. In just a few moments, I'll be joined by Steve Bissett to discuss designing your tech team to maximize productivity in 2024. We are excited to kick off the talk shortly, so settle in for a great conversation. But before we jump into tonight's talk, a few quick housekeeping things. First of all, remember, you can see us, but we can't see you. If you drop off the video, you can come back anytime with the same link you received for the email you registered for the event. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, you can post them in the questions tab on the right-hand side. Finally, you can use the chat to add comments throughout the evening. While we wait maybe for a few more people to join, let's try that out. If you've joined recently, tell us your name, company, and where you're from. And of course, a big hello to everybody out there. Nice, Cape Town, good representation. Awesome, that worked well. I'm gonna welcome Steve. Steve, welcome. Please give us a quick intro.
Hello. First of all, can everyone hear me? Okay. Cool. Sounds good. A little bit about me. I was a software engineer for a long time. I'm originally from KZN, from Durban. I moved to Cape Town when I came to university. I went to university at UCT. I initially studied electrical engineering or electrical and computer engineering. I went straight into the software industry, spent a bit of time in software consulting, and then I shifted over to Zappi. We're a company, a tech platform in the market research industry, and I joined Zappi as a small startup, and now it's quite a bit bigger company at the moment. So I've been here about 8.5 years in various roles. I was first a tech lead, and then I had a bit of a stint in product management, and I've come back in as an engineering manager now. So quite a broad set of things. Especially being in a company for some time, I've always been able to change things up and learn a lot of breadth in my role, which is really fun and enjoyable. But very much passionate about the tech industry and what it has to offer. And I live in Cape Town. I live in Gardens, and when I'm not at my desk, I'm a big trail runner, always out on the mountains, and also spend a lot of time swimming in the ocean. I'm one of those people that's in one of those morning cold water things that people may refer to as a cult, but aren't actually. Just a good way to have coffee in the water.
Yeah, Cape Town water, I'm not so sure. So before we get into it, let's do a quick icebreaker question. As for you, Steve, if you could add one fictional character to your dream team to boost productivity, who would it be and why? Feel free to get creative.
It's a very tough one. I think I would just say the first thing that came to mind. I thought of a fictional Elon Musk who's got his level of inspiration and ambition, but matched with a little bit more sleep and less caffeine, I think. What would we call him? Maybe with offers in Elon Zen. Maybe if Elon had a bit more Zen, I would be keen to work with him in the team.
Awesome. That's a great answer. Cool. So tonight we'll be covering 3 topics: lessons for building tech teams in 2023, building a productive team in 2024, and then maintaining or growing an efficient team. So let's jump straight in. Question, Steve. How has the recruitment landscape changed for tech roles in 2023, and how did you adapt your hiring strategies accordingly?
I think the economic landscape has been quite tough across the board in the tech industry. We saw, starting with big tech at the end of last year, we started to see signs of layoffs and things tightening up in VC and private equity funding across the board. And I think everyone has experienced that to some degree. I think yesterday we saw Spotify lay off another 1,500 people, or 17% of their workforce. So it does seem to be continuing. I think we've come from a very high growth environment, and the industry is steering. And I think a lot of people have felt that this growth is unsustainable for some time, really pushing the boundaries of growth without sustainable growth and profitability. And we're seeing the macroeconomic environment as well switch from a low inflation, which is very easy to borrow money in those kind of times, to a high inflation environment. And I think we've also seen, as we've all seen, AI start to become introduced from being a buzzword to being into mass visibility and consumption. And that's through a lot of different things. In the tech industry, we've started using a lot of things. We've started using ChatGPT in our work. We've started using Copilot, and we're seeing the emergence of things like Copilot for X, where a lot of new applications are coming up built to help people do everyday things and business tasks. So we've really seen that come in. And I think there's the notion that's often referred to as wartime and peacetime environments. And I don't mean to use those terms. I know there's a lot of really horrible conflict going on in the world. So I mean these in a positive sense of the word. But when things change from a peacetime environment where you focus more on sustainability and creativity and things like that, whereas now when things tighten up a lot, everything needs to change, including leadership, and sometimes the people needed to steer in a certain direction. We need to make decisions a lot quicker, and we need to focus on getting things done faster. That might be due to an increased competitive landscape, or it might be from a cash perspective that we need to just tighten things up and move forward. So I think we've seen that, and leadership becomes ever more important, I think, in these kind of environments, because it's oftentimes that you need to lean on and try, and the game changes and you need to get more productivity out of that.
Yeah, I can definitely echo. It's definitely been a bit of a rough year. Our 2024 State of Developer Nation report will be launched soon. And from there, 5% of devs have reported being retrenched this past year. And if we look at the next year that's coming, 33% of them are looking to move jobs. So it's definitely a bit of a rough season at the moment. Can you share specific challenges you faced while hiring top talent and what strategies proved effective?
Yeah, I think some of the things, this is often, there's a common adage around this, but I think a lot of the people, there are really, really great people out there that have lost their jobs this year. And I know there's an unusually large amount of that. And I do want to give sympathy to that. As well as that, there's a lot of people in that are in jobs already. They might have very few push factors. When we talk about people who change roles, there's usually push factors, something that may be pushing you out of your current role, and then there may be pull factors that bring you into another role. And a lot of people may have very few push factors, especially in a tighter environment. People feel a little bit more sticky because they're a bit nervous to get into somewhere and perhaps be the last person into an organization. And I think they may be well compensated, they might be highly skilled and just really enjoy what they're doing. And then, so you have to focus more on the pull factors. So what is the technologies that you work with that may interest people? What is your mission? What is your work environment like? The flexibility that you offer, perks, and just find their unmet needs. People ultimately seek employment to meet some needs, and see if your environment can provide a better opportunity. Just had the afternoon sun rays start piercing my face, so I apologize if I'm staring into it a bit. And then I think talking about also just a little bit the sources of where to look when hiring talent. And I think we in the past have used multiple sources and platforms. I think one of them is word of mouth referrals. We found this quite a successful thing, which I think a lot of you would agree with. One of the reasons for this is having upfront context on the work environment where you are. They've had a lot of time to ask upfront questions, understand the interview process, which Nick, maybe you would touch on, because I think I saw some pieces in previous State of the Developer Nation content saying that understanding the interview process is a big piece as well. And then role fit, someone is actually vouching for that person. And then also OfferZen, we've been using OfferZen for some time. Really strong benefits of visibility. It's a marketplace of people who may be happy in their current roles, but are also open to changing to new ones. And those are people you wouldn't normally come across. And you can get a lot of information up front. And it seems to be a platform that, from my experience, engineers really enjoy. There's a really good brand. We all have a large number of the t-shirts in our cupboards, and I think there's a really strong brand appeal to it. And then I think also direct reach outs. We do have, some people in our talent teams that will take a more casual approach. And I think there's also then specialist recruiters. And I think there's some of this. So Brett Jones was actually the recruiter who initially got me into my Zappi role, which I really, really appreciate. And I and a lot of other people regarded him to be, one of the really top end recruiters in Cape Town, because he had a really unique and different approach. And I think it can be a little bit hit or miss. It's a really hard thing to do. I emphasize for people that are in, tech recruitment, developers can sometimes be a little bit sour on occasions. But some of the methods used can turn away candidates, or it might be about mis-selling the information. And then also sometimes you may get thrown a little bit too deep too quickly. You try and find an initial match, and then that a casual chat goes straight into an interview, and someone's immediately putting you into a tech test, and it's not something you you intended. So those are just a couple of the different ways and best things that, from my experience, we've had a lot of success with.
Great. Yeah, I can definitely speak towards the hiring process being really important to companies. If developers stay in touch with them, if they understand what the process is like, it really gives a great candidate experience at the end of the day. And that's one way to definitely attract top talent. Moving over, if you think back to how you designed your team this year, what are some of the main takeaways that you'll be taking into next year? Like what worked, what didn't really work?
There's quite a bit to explore here, I think. What worked well? I think having long-running teams, so teams that really get to know each other quite well and built on high trust. To me, I'm a big advocate of high trust in teams and teams of people that are radically and continuously trying to improve, to be both better people and engineers. I think another thing is having a single team mission that ladders up to the company vision and mission. That goes to extend that, saying reducing the number of focuses for each team, which is actually really sometimes hard to do in practice when we know there's a lot that we want to achieve for ourselves. I think also clear roles and responsibilities within teams. So trying to avoid the bystander effect in teams, but also not so specialized that someone becomes the guy of X and or the lady of X who then becomes a key man dependency in that. So, and I think it's about matching skills and ambitions for opportunities to grow. And then I think also clarity on exactly what success looks like, bringing in fresh perspectives as well of what's working well in other industries, industry trends, and adapting them to our needs. And then also designing a team by the team, understanding what the team wants, how do people want to work, and then also just in-person time together. As a remote company, we still see immense value in face-to-face communication. We still try and get teams together, even though we work in a fully distributed way by default. We do really try and prioritize that. And I think some things that didn't work is the opposite of the things I just mentioned. I think trying to focus on a single area with multiple contributing teams and splitting focus. I just had a fresh experience with that where we tried to build a new platform with 5 different teams contributing. We've eventually, found moving an inch in 10 directions instead of mile, and really changing that up, trying to push that down into a team with a more singular focus.
Yeah, really great to hear you talk about trust, because I think the trust component definitely helps the team make good decisions, which then obviously leads into empowering your team to make decisions, some autonomy running there. I think all of those things definitely plays a lot into this concept of how to build productivity, which is our next question. So we'll go straight into it. Can you maybe explain to me what your view is on productivity?
I think productivity is an interesting one. I've seen quite a lot of discussion going back and forth. There was a McKinsey report released earlier this year that ruffled feathers of a lot of engineers. It started talking about measuring lines of code and things like that, and there was quite a backlash and response from Kent Beck and Martin Fowler being 2 of the people that did respond. But going back to the drawing board on productivity, if you look at the etymology of productivity, it came from a French word initially in the 1600s, which was about serving to produce. And before that, a Latin word meaning fit for production. And I think it's ultimately, for me, productivity is often around the outputs, but I think you need to be clear that it's about the value and the overall outcomes that are generated, and also how that enables you to do that sustainably through building effective teams. So I think it's solving problems for a customer in a way that works for your teams and for your business as a whole is what productivity is to me.
Awesome. Yeah, I think as leaders, it's very easy to fall into this 100% utilization trap for our teams. So maybe in your experience, right, what are the most effective ways to increase a dev team's productivity?
Increasing productivity, I think it comes back to what I mentioned earlier. So the one thing is to make sure that there's a lot of trust in the team. And I think you have to intentionally spend time and effort building and maintaining that trust. The other is, I think, creating clarity through clear expectations and outputs and outcomes. And that goes from a high level, but to the smaller pieces of work that you take in and the engineers on your teams. Every piece of work that you actually do has some kind of output, whether that's a design, whether it's a presentation that comes out of something, or a team session, or a piece of code. Everything does have an output, and just being clear with everyone on your team between ourselves, what is that, is very useful. And then bringing energy, bringing energy and creating energy in the team, I think is very important as well. As leaders, sometimes you don't realize how much that has an impact. If you come in and you're bringing a more downbeat or jaded energy into the team, you'll see it actually really rubs off quite quickly. And then also just practices and building habits around them. I'll probably dive a bit deeper into habits. I think habits has been a big theme of my year, and I would really recommend Atomic Habits off the back of it. It's been a very transformative book for me to read. And then also leveraging new tools like AI, Copilot, that kind of thing. And then one thing that I really want to be a key takeaway out of today, I think a lot of people do look at the Dora research program, which I think some of you may or may not heard of. I will make sure some links to their latest report has been shared out of this, because it's a really exceptional research program that's been running now for over 10 years that translates a lot of development and engineering practices into organizational and team performance. And there's some lessons that we've taken out of there around code review times, unnecessary approval loops, and using tools like trunk-based development. And they touch a lot in culture in those reports as well, and really say that, culture is the starting point, and then the tooling comes after, once you're up and running. There's a question in the chat. I'm just not sure if I should address that straight away or hold that to the end. Either way, I'm happy.
I think go for it. Let's do it.
How do you know you have built trust? So I think one of the key tools that I like to use for this is from the 5 dysfunctions of a team. Those are generally, so lack of trust is the bottom one. You can pick that up when people hesitate to ask for help, or start concealing weaknesses, or they dread meetings and avoid team members, and just generally people that I think a lot of teams, I've come to realize more and more that building teams and growing people is a lot of like plants. And sometimes you'll have someone in the team who's like a peace lily, if any of you own one. It's the plant that tells you when all the others need to be watered. And sometimes you may have people in your teams that are a little bit more vocal about things. And sometimes if someone like that is going quiet, it generally to me points out maybe there's a trust problem. And the trust is the bottom. If you read that book about high performance teams and dysfunctional teams, trust is the bottom of the pyramid. And then it's around how people deal with conflict. Do they go around problems and not confront the tough issues? So I can share some of that as well. I do have a few condensed sort of articles that touch on the key points in that book, but I think it's really exceptional set of like tool set that digs into understanding which behaviors those are, if that answers your question.
I think that was pretty great. We recently did a similar exercise at Office Zen, and I think the only piece to contribute to that is to say, I think once peers can hold each other accountable for what it is that we're working on in a good way, I think then you're winning. So that's kind of what we're aiming for at the end of the day. So if you have a good base of trust, it could follow all the way through actually to results. And that's kind of the deal, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think maybe just a question to you, Nick. It's something that you've probably seen is that I think when a team is functioning healthily, you actually see a lot of rigorous and constructive debate that happens, and people are not actually afraid to disagree with each other. And they have this really exceptional ability to disagree and then pick a direction and repair that relationship.
Absolutely. Rigorous debate. Not to punt the book, but I recently got enlightened to multipliers. And one of the things there is to make sure that you create the space for debate and don't just fall in to make a decision and move on. If you want people to really buy into what's happening, you really need to create that surface area for the people to talk about it. And I think if you have the trust, you can do it. And at the end of the day, you're probably going to achieve some great things. Yeah. Okay, just seeing where we are at. So do you have any advice for teams working with a limited budget or less capacity? What are the most important things to get right when designing a team under these circumstances?
I think generally, if you're just when we say designing a team, I guess we've got to think like, what does designing a team mean? That might be making a change. It might be building a new team. In most cases, you'll be working with existing people that are in your organization that you know, and perhaps looking to hire and grow some extra people. So I think one of the first things is looking at the level of trust and skills within those people, because like I said, first you've got to build that trust first. Commitment, efficiency, and productivity, I think, come later. I think when it comes to like tight capacity, I think having been in my current company for 8.5 years, we've seen in environments where we've hired 40 engineers in the space of 6 months at one point, and then we've gone through stints where we haven't for some time. And I think very often you feel this inclination to want to hit the hire button. And I think most of us have the intuition to do that too quickly and assume that will solve a problem when it's normally something underlying that is actually there. I think in taking into account the Pareto principle, which I think bears some level of accuracy, is that 20% of the work generates 80% of the results. And it's your role as a leader to find that 20% so you can point the drills into the right rock. And then I think it's also about deeply understanding people. So I think a lot of the time we treat people as too similar to each other and try and do a sort of one style fits all kind of thing. And I think this is a really positive where the industry still has a lot of work to do, but just embracing diversity of backgrounds, diversity of different upbringings, diversity of thought and opinion, and doing things in different ways and enabling people to work how they work best and what their skills are. Like, what are they going through as people? What lights their passion on fire? What depletes them? And I think in some cases we work in the tech industry with a lot of neurodiversity, and in your teams, like as a manager for any period of time, you will engage with this a lot in the tech industry. And you don't have to do this through labels. It can be through behaviors, and incisively listen to people and what support they need. These might be people who in your teams deal with challenges with ADHD, where people have a more interest-based rather than importance-based nervous system. It might be people who suffer from mental health challenges. And all of these people all of your teammates that have these challenges also have superpowers that correspond with them. Someone with who suffers from anxiety is normally have a heightened sense of understanding, and people with ADHD are super creative and innovative, high energy. So it's really about leveraging the strengths of the team. And when building a team with limited capacity, it's not about building a team of people that don't have weakness. It's about making sure the team as a whole covers each other's weaknesses with the strengths of others. And then I think the last thing would be to say, like, be radical in your organizational design. Change is uncomfortable. It's messy at first. It's expected to be like that. A lot of people appear to not like it, and that can make people hesitant to not make radical change. But ultimately, I think if you do make it in the right way, you can make a lot of change very quickly, understand there's going to be an uncomfortable period, get people to buy into that sense of discomfort, and move quickly, knowing that a lot of them are reversible to a large degree.
Yeah, be brave. It's hard to be brave. Yeah, and then just want to echo what you basically mentioned around tapping into people's native genius. Again, quote there from the Multipliers book, but I think that's really cool because at the end of the day, you can use them to their highest point of contribution and create that environment where you're requiring people's best work and thinking. And if you go down that path, I definitely think success awaits. So that's really cool. All right, and then for the last question on the second topic, any trends that you'll be taking into account in how you'll design your team for 2024?
Trends, I think an interesting one, I think with the tighter market is, I don't know if that's a trend or not, but we are often switching into a mode where, coming from a high growth environment where we're onboarding we're onboarding people all the time, and your teams are growing rapidly, and your onboarding and application setup becomes really important. And I think with things being a little bit tighter going into 2024, you take that into consideration of actually spending time with your existing teams and growth and working within that. I think a lot of things stay the same, but I think this is something I think we've dealt with and tried to bring in a lot throughout the years, is people bringing more of themselves to work. I think that there is starting to become more of a culture of working sustainably to avoid burnout. And I think that at times the tech industry does have quite a lot of burnout in it. And I think that's a trend that we see generationally almost is starting to change quite a bit, where people are a bit more focused on where they set boundaries within work and really integrate work into their lives and choose how they interact in a work environment.
I'm really glad you mentioning burnout. I had a conversation today with someone on my team on burnout, and the topic went, if people can see the impact of their work, they're probably less likely to suffer from as much burnout because they see the impact that they're having. So I think there's definitely something there. Nice. Okay, moving on to maintaining growth and an efficient team. How do you as a leader approach balancing productivity and well-being within your team?
Productivity and well-being. I think I just said there. I probably do that a lot. Sorry. There we go. Again, there's a great book by Daniel Pink. It's called Drive. And I haven't read the whole thing, I must admit, but I have read that book pop up more and more every year since it was written. And he covers three concepts: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And all of these three things, he speaks to avoiding burnout and really finding your true happiness and true effectiveness through these three things. And I think starting with purpose, we all have a different purpose that we derive from our work. It might be for you meeting your needs at home. It might be providing for a family. It might be changing an industry or building a product that meets a need or desire by solving a problem, or making change in the world. And that purpose is slightly different, and it is what people derive as purpose is quite a personal thing. And in that, I think balancing productivity with well-being, I think you've got to get people bought into your mission. When people aren't bought in, and then it can be quite hard because it feels harder to contribute, and then might have a little bit less intrinsic motivation. That's a lot of what's spoken about in this book, is difference between extrinsic and intrinsic motivators. And I think part of this also with productivity, Satya Nadella has 3 leadership principles, which I think are really great and simple, and I look at them every day. And one of them, the first one, is create clarity. When people have clarity, they are and you give them the autonomy. First, you've got to create the clarity and give them the full autonomy, and then generate energy in the team through that clarity. And the third is getting things done. And create clarity, generate energy, get things done effectively. And those are, I think, key. And sometimes it might be trying to work more on systems and things like that. So I think, and then also just allow your team total trust to manage their time, their energy, and their work environment. There's something to acknowledge that people at times may have a lot going on personally, and you may need to provide additional support. There's, in your career, you are going to have times of enabling periods of accelerated growth where you grow really quickly, especially earlier on in your career. And then you might have periods of a flattened trajectory. For some people, that's when you first have children, or it might be looking after a relative going through a chronic illness, something like that. Or it might just be that you want to take a sabbatical and do something else. And those are totally normal and becoming, I think the industry is doing really well to accept those different periods and needs that people have and want to take part in. So I think providing that support, also just encouraging that support to people that need it. There's a lot of great platforms out there. We use one called Spill, which allows people to speak to a therapist anytime they like, if they would like to talk about a challenge in the workplace, some conflict they'd had, personal issue or anything like that, which is quite good. It just, you can press a button and it's right there. And then I think one thing we use, I think, is unlimited paid time off. We have a minimum on that so that we ensure people use it and don't fall into any traps. It's working very well. I switched back from product management to engineering management this year. I took a few weeks off. That was great. And I could do that without guilt of feeling like I'm chipping time off with my family at the end of Christmas, where I'll go back to KZN. And I think it's something that doesn't really have any downsides. We haven't really seen it. I think in its implementation can sometimes. When we first implemented it, we found, due to mostly US cultural reasons, it was mostly our US colleagues that were actually taking a little bit less. And we almost had to poke them a little bit with a stick and say, take a little more leave, it will benefit you. So if people are sick, let them recover, come back strong. Shouldn't need permission to stop working if you have a headache. I think these things sound obvious, but they're not always so common. And support people with continuous learning, give them a space to learn new things. If someone isn't feeling up for doing a piece of work on a Friday, give them space to actually go about learning something. Also supporting people in daily movement and exercise. As developers and engineers, a lot of us are quite indoors a lot of the time. We sit at desks. If you do that every day for 40 years and you're not moving your body, it can cause a lot of problems. So ensure people live full lives, hobbies, causes close to their hearts, and support them how they do best. Sorry, that was a very long answer. I spoke a lot, but something I'm quite passionate about. So if anyone would like to pick my brain on that, please do.
Yeah, and obviously a theme there is lead by example, because I think if you show that to your team, they're probably more open to accepting those things. Something that we recently did, we also remote, so social engagement obviously is a little bit harder. So we have this random thing where you can go and say on Slack, you're going to have a coffee, creating a little coffee huddle. For those 15 minutes, it's a little social engagement. People can just drink coffee together and take their mind off work a little bit and the things, just to do the thing. And then also, glad you mentioned mental health resources that's available. We use a service called Ollie. And what's really nice there is it actually allows group sessions as well. So your whole team can actually go into a session and talk about something in case, there was maybe some conflict and some difficult situation, whatever it is, and you feel more comfortable in a controlled environment like that to talk as well. So I think it's really cool to show employees that you really care, or your team rather, that you really, really care about their long-term success.
How did you say you set up those coffee huddles? Does that just happen sporadically?
That's it. I had a chat with the team. We spoke about the feeling of connectedness in this remote environment, knowing that it's really hard. We've got company events and those sort of things, but If you are truly remote, it's still a little bit hard because all your engagements are work focused other than those. So it's literally, I've got a quite set coffee routine, which I'm sure many people do. So before our 9 o'clock stand-ups, I'll literally just ping everybody in we've got like a social channel saying, okay, I'm having a coffee break. Whoever wants to join me, that can join. Yeah, it's quite fun. People join and we talk about all random things. And my coffee routine was our first topic of conversation as well. Yeah, so it's pretty cool.
That sounds really cool.
And then maybe just another sneak peek at our 2024 State of Developed Nation report. It revealed that poor work-life balance is part of the top 5 reasons why devs leave a role. And number 1 and 2 is a better salary and poor management. And then we go to our last question. What are your must-have tools and resources to ensure your team is set up for growth and collaboration?
I think there's quite a lot of interpretation into how this could be answered. I think there's things like actual hard tools that we use in the real world. There's some softer things, and then there's some readings. And I think, where do I start? So I think, so one of the things is your leadership principles and how you work and how you connect your team's mission to the organization. So I think that's a softer thing that is there. Such in Adela's principles that I talked about is another example of that. Create clarity, generate energy, get the important things done. Another thing is habits. And I think over time, over the last couple of years, I've started looking a lot more into habits and how habits lead up to goals. And we could say maybe habits is not a tool, but it 100% is. Because that, if you read Atomic Habits, I first read Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, I think his name is. And then his book was built on top of by James Clear. And it was written 3 or 4 years ago, but was the #1 selling book on Amazon in the last year. And I think that's for a really good reason. And he makes a few key points in there that were really transformative to me. I think sometimes people hate the word process or attach a negative connotation to it, but he does it in a way that is really, really awesome, in a way that you can actually interact with it. And I implemented some of the lessons from that book, and I ran or cycled every day for a year as a result. And it's not something that I could just do before. And one of his points in there is that you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And your goal is that desired outcome, and your system is the daily habits that will get you there. And it's a reframe of process. There is a little bit of process in that, but his point is that I don't really like the word losers here, but it was in the context of sports teams. He says winners and losers have the same goal, and the difference between them is actually around the habits that are created. So I'll send out that book. I think it's really, really good, and I think for me that's a very good tool. So it's about how can you introduce habits slowly within your teams that aim to improve things over time. And that's largely aligned with a lot of the agile principles of how do we introspect, adapt, and change things. But it's not always, you can't just put a goal. If you put goals, they in James Clear's view, goals restrict your happiness and it only impacts a momentary change. They're very important to have goals, but it's even more important to make sure you have the habits to achieve them. The other tool, I've mentioned it once in this call today, is the Dora research program. They've just released their 2023 report quite recently. There's quite a few takeaways from there. One of them is around the rates of change at which you push out code, what that has on team and organizational performance. One of the tools we've taken on board for that is trunk-based development, where we try and really cut down our pull request review times and those loops. But there's some really interesting findings. I think AI is still very new, but they actually found in their research that AI had quite a mixed productivity impact in their report this year, and they actually discuss a little bit on how that was unexpected. So it's quite an interesting thing to read. I haven't fully dug into it yet. They also made some interesting insights, like when using trunk-based development, the amount of, if you have high quality documentation, that has a 12.8 times higher impact on organizational performance when using trunk-based development in conjunction with high quality documentation. I know we all love to write documentation. So, and then they talk about actually culture quite a lot. They talk about Western organizational culture. There's three kinds in that system, where generative cultures is the one to aim for. It's performance oriented, as compared with bureaucratic cultures and pathological cultures. So there's a wealth of tools in there. I'm not going to do them justice in this call, but I will send out and try and package those things up. I think a growth mindset as well is going to put you in good stead. I think also there's another book I'm reading called Amp It Up. It's from James Slootman. He's the CEO of Snowflake, and he talks about a lot about drivers and passengers, and really trying to make sure that the right people are on the bus. He got that concept from a VW campaign where they had an ad where they wanted people to become drivers, and those are the people that really make things happen, and you want to increase your ratio of drivers and people. And I think you were talking about multipliers, which is the drivers are the multipliers, I think, in your organization. And then in terms of actual physical tools, we try and use some tools to expand and visualize a lot of our things in Jira, or if you're using Linear or Jira, we using a lot. There's really awesome like Miro integrations now to make that much more visual. Notion using quite extensively, and GitHub, version control, Zoom, and the usual. And then documentation, use other teams as guinea pigs. Pick someone out from another team and say, can you set up our application in 10 minutes? Does it work? Is it clear what you're doing? What do you need to know? Because otherwise you can develop this culture where you need to ask people for everything. And then also, yeah, I guess just the last note, I've mentioned a lot of books and things, and probably a little bit too much here, but the industry has been around for a while. Leadership has been around for a while. Management has been around for a while. It does change as culture and society changes, but there's so much work and research out there. There isn't really the need to reinvent the wheel. There's the ability to stand on the shoulders of giants, and a lot of things out there.
Absolutely. Speaking about the Dora community, just want to give a shout out to them. They have quite regular events that they also host. I think the latest one was actually on trunk-based development, or will be. So definitely check that out as well. I can also echo the sentiments. We worked through this Accelerate book at the beginning of the year. A lot of the insights of the report they've actually packaged in that book. So if people are interested in those Dora capabilities, I definitely can also recommend that Accelerate book. That brings us to a close. We're going to host a Q&A. We're going to take some questions from the audience. So first questions from Grant. How do you manage an underperforming team?
Big question. I said at the start or in the middle that I find software engineering looking more and more like plants and maintaining a garden, and how you may have a peace lily in your team. I think if you go into a garden, you buy a new flat, you go into the garden, and all the plants are wilting. The first thing you know there that those plants are underperforming, we could call it. But you can't immediately say why. Is that the fault of the plants itself, or is it the fault of the environment? And an environment is contributed to by multiple things. In the case of plants, it's sunshine, it's nutrients, it's the position of them, it's the amount of water. And the first approach is to uncover the dysfunctions of the team for me, and give people the benefit of the doubt. It's a lot of the time, it's usually not the person, it's usually an environment, and you own the change in that environment. So it's uncovering, is it something with the team? Deeply listen to the people and understand that. And I think once you have that discussion, and you can also get things like better communication going, and if you start seeing, you know, the presence of healthy conflict and that, and then if there still are repeatedly poor performance after that, you also then have to just understand, is it something with a team? Is it mismatched people? Sometimes you even might have a mismatch between a manager and a person on the team. Sometimes that might just be down to personality types, and that could stop someone from thriving as well. So that maybe sounds like a vague answer, but I think what I mean is look out for the environment first before anything else.
Yeah, I don't think that was vague at all. I think that was pretty concise. Literally, the only part I can add to that is read the Multiplies book, because the concept of diminisher and accidental diminisher could really apply to that sentiment. So yeah. Moving to the next question from Joseph. Do you think encouraging the team, specifically juniors and intermediates, to utilize tools like ChatGPT is okay for long-term productivity? My concern is stunting their independent thinking and understanding and experience growth.
That's a hard one to answer, and I think it's been a big topic of the moment. I think all of the senior engineers using GPT find when they're blocked on something or we're procrastinating, it can just speed up things so rapidly. Instead of a few hours of procrastination, you can unblock yourself and move forward quite quickly. When it comes to specifically juniors and intermediate engineers, I think one thing that would be a problem is people using GPT without having an admission with the team that that is what they're using, that came up with the thing, if it kind of comes to that, because then it might be a little bit clearer as to where those ideas generated from, and if there's a blocker in that, it could be an older version of code that it was referring to or something like that. I think this is a science experiment that we're just starting to see the tip of. I actually don't have an answer. I do think it's okay to encourage people to use the tools. I think it's I used to find frustration in school when they told me I couldn't use a certain kind of calculator. I don't think it would have really. There's a benefit to first principles sometimes, but I think you've also got to roll with the times and use the tools that are available, and it's up to us to actually learn how does that change society, how does it change our companies and our teams.
Yeah, rolling with the times. The only analogy I could think of was back in the day, people didn't use computers to do their jobs. Now we use a lot of computers to do our jobs. So that evolution took place. So perhaps we're looking at another evolution of things. Yeah. All right, next question from Rogan. With regards to remote and hybrid, what challenges have you faced with remote or hybrid, and how do you deal or navigate those challenges? What tips can you give with regards to keeping your hybrid or remote teams fires lit?
Do you want to take a stab at this one first, Nick, and then I'll respond?
Yeah, sure. So obviously the challenge comes from feeling a bit of a disconnect. I think that's probably the biggest one we faced. And as I mentioned earlier, for us to try and address that disconnect really, really early on before it starts festering is important. So make sure you keep the engagement up with the team, regularly check in the one-on-ones, be explicit about it, ask them how they feel about it. We do internal surveys as well to do a sense check on how people are feeling. So yeah, a simple one, set up a regular coffee thing, you know. Steve?
Yeah, it's I think this is something that I and my teams haven't fully mastered yet. I said we do believe face-to-face time is important. It helps a lot in building trust, and when people have more of that rapport, I think if you've met someone face-to-face, I feel personally, and a lot of people normally back this up, that it feels easier afterwards to work with them. So I think that's a challenge of, we had a lot of people who were onboarded during the COVID era who didn't get to meet any of their teammates sometimes for 2 years, which is really tricky. The hardest thing for me, the biggest challenge I find, is if you're in a really tight time crunch and you want to get something done quickly, whether it's a prototype or a deadline or something like that. then I think that gets tricky to generate that energy and togetherness, where if you were in the same space, you just round people up, you're all in the same time zone, and you can get it done together. I think one of the things that we're trying to do a lot more is little huddles, like Nick mentioned, and then also just making much more active use of pair programming, because that cuts down a lot of that async time. Personally, on some of my teams, I have people in Canada and Santiago, and around the time zones is more of a challenge to me than the remote itself.
Nice. And then we'll do one more from Bimberai. I hope I pronounced that correctly. In the age of tech layoffs, what's your advice for software engineers to safeguard their careers? How have the tech layoffs affected tech interviews? Example, hire, no hire kind of decisions.
Should I take a stab first? So I think in terms of hiring, there is I think you may need to differentiate yourself a little bit more as an engineer in the hiring process. One of the most clear ways of doing that, and people that have tended to do this have turned out to be very, very successful engineers, is usually having some kind of demonstrable portfolio or side project that shows you've thought about something. You've maybe, even if you're not very strong UI designer or something, maybe you build then a data type prototype, or you build something small and just talk through how you've done that. I think it's really a strong differentiator. In terms of safeguarding your career, I think sometimes it's luck of the draw, which organization or team you're in, and if there's a change in direction, like a strategic change, that might come from a change in the market. You might not know that, but in terms of, I think it's always just about trying to make the most impact you can, like take extreme ownership of things, put yourself forward, and really make a big impact, and then hopefully you'll be in a position where your company is growing enough to not need to be in that situation. But there will be some of it that maybe is inevitable when the economy gets quite tight.
Yeah, I think I saw a post or an article recently where engineers said that they actually had 3 jobs at the same time, and they got laid off from 2. So that was one approach. I would not recommend that approach. I'd probably recommend the opposite, and that's to get back to the impact. Like really commit yourself to your trade, and show that you have a passion for what you're doing. And if you do that and you're closely aligned to the company values, I think unless it is just luck of the draw and drastic change within the organization, which is kind of unforeseeable, I think that could be a strategy to take on. And that's it. So time to wrap things up. We've reached the end of our event. This is our last webinar for 2023. But we've got 2024 lined up already. So if you'd like to join one of these upcoming events, just select on the poll. We covered a lot of ground this evening, so I want to send a special thank you to Steve for making time for us. And thanks for everybody else for joining as well. Bye, everyone.